So these subjects that I've addressed in previous lectures, divorce and remarriage, birth control, women in leadership, they have a common theme. These are just some of the symptoms of the leaven of second wave feminism that has infected American Protestant Christendom. Women have rejected the dignity and equality that comes from Christianity, and they have turned aside to paganism, which actually is more repressive. All throughout history, paganism repressed women and Christianity offered liberation. Now we're turning back towards slavery. Of course, feminists will look at it as like, oh, we're being set free from the oppression of the patriarchy. But in fact, they crave a slavery of a different sort, a slavery to their own evil desires and corporate masters. In Romans 6:16 it says, know ye not that to whom ye yield yourselves servants to obey, his servants ye are to whom ye obey, whether of sin unto death or of obedience unto righteousness. And Jesus says in John 8:34, whosoever committeth sin is the servant of sin. So sin, or rebellion against God's order, brings slavery, not liberty. Women have turned their backs on being the queen of the castle of the home and the master of future generations, and instead have made themselves into expendable corporate chattel, office machines to be used and discarded by men who have no lasting obligation to their welfare. There is far more change to be wrought in the world by raising the next generation than through demeaning slavery to corporations. Motherhood is not debilitating. Motherhood is empowering. Corporate slavery is not fulfilling. It is vacuous. Family is fulfilling. To be a wife and a mother is truly powerful. Now, this is not just some random thing where women all of a sudden decided, hey, we're not happy in our homes. We want to go out in the workforce. This is by design. The system is working exactly the way it was designed to work. The masters of corporate finance have financed the feminist movement and driven it to their own ends. And there are several reasons for this. Of course, more women into the workforce increases the more people are paying taxes and interest. It increases the pool of labor, and so it decreases overall wages. And by increasing the number of people in the workforce, it also makes it so more people are working part-time with less benefits. There's less obligation of the company to their employees. There's no living wage anymore. There's just temporary employment. And the feminist workers and women in the workplace creates an environment where people are more inclined to accept corporate policies without question. They're less inclined to organize in unions and try to really change things, as men are more inclined towards these political power structures. So women are easier to control when they're put into the workforce. And also, when children are separated from their mothers, children now have to be put in school and in daycare. And who's raising the children anymore? Well, it's like the Disney Channel. And what do? They get a steady stream of corporate propaganda. So they're going to become good little consumer units. They're going to be buying more things, more profits for the corporations. And of course, if mom is not home fixing dinner, you're going to have to go out to eat. You have to get fast food. You have to get processed food. And this is more and more money for the corporations. This is all about making the centralized state and the masters of global finance as the new family. No longer is the family unit the source of your identity and your tribe and your clan. Now it's McDonald's and Disney and these big corporations that are doing that. And this is all by design. You know, everyone is to be made into a good little corporate slave or human resource or consumer unit where their behaviors are better guided by the masters of finance rather than their traditional family heritage. And also, when men are taken away from the home, then the women and children are easier subject to exploitation, sexual exploitation, financial exploitation. They become more vulnerable, whereas before they were protected by their fathers. Women's liberation encourages sexual promiscuity. Promiscuity has been touted as liberation from oppression. Oh, it's anti-establishment. It's going to set you free. You can do all this stuff you always wanted to do. But in fact, it is pro-establishment slavery, because This is what the social engineers want. A morally compromised people is easy to control. If you're a slave to your desires, you're also a slave to those who provide for those desires. And this is by design. This is not merely human nature, although it's a weakness of human nature, but this is something that's been engineered in our society. The power of government is turned against the family, and it favors promiscuous, non-reproductive sex, where people have no allegiance to the family, but only to the central state. Of course, the logical outworking of radical feminism is lesbianism, which many radical feminists came out and openly promoted. But Christians, of course, will reject this. They're going to draw a line. They're going to say homosexuality is wrong. But this is inconsistent because the same scriptures that teach against homosexuality also teach against women in leadership, which Christians allow. So it's hypocritical to condemn and oppose homosexuality while at the same time allowing women in leadership. If you're going to follow the Bible, you should follow the Bible. If you're not, then what difference does it make? Now, in the matter of women voting, it was brought in with the promise that women are going to make the government more economical because they're so frugal. They go shopping and they're always watching the cost, and so they're going to be very conservative, right? Well, women can be conservative with their own money, but they have proven to be extremely liberal with other people's money. Women voters have led to the growth of domestic spending and the nanny state since women's suffrage was introduced unto the present day. Women with their maternal instincts tend to vote for higher taxes, larger government social programs. They support Democrats and Medicare, Social Security, and education. Women look to the government for the financial security that once was provided by their fathers and husbands. They want a big daddy government to provide for them when they mother children out of wedlock, or when they have children from a marriage, when they've put the father out of the home. Women complain about unequal pay, but this is a red herring. Women are more risk averse than men by nature. They tend to choose career paths that provide less income. They also might take a break from their career to have a child, which naturally is not going to be as profitable. They also favor graduated income taxes, which affects them less. Women vote for more liberal divorce laws and laws that favor women as a class. And then they fall victim to increased divorce, and then they have to vote for funding for child care and child support and other things to help provide for these children that there's no longer a father around to provide for. For women, if they actually desired to follow God's order, in the matter of voting, they wouldn't vote at all, or they would vote in concert with their fathers or their husbands. Now, the effects of women voting have come in waves. During the first wave, they passed prohibition in 1919 as a social campaign against what was then primarily a male vice. Over the next generation, they pushed for more liberal divorce laws, birth control laws, and laws that favored women. Then came the second wave. By the 70s, the women had triumphed in politics. They found themselves increasingly divorced or with children born out of wedlock. So then they tended to vote for more welfare benefits to help with the cost of child rearing. Of course, women who do remain married and provide for their children are less inclined to support these policies and vote in more fiscally conservative ways, but there's less and less of them over time. Men and women are wired differently. Women are not suited to bear rule over men. Now, women claim that there's not enough good men out there to fill positions of power, or that men have abdicated their moral responsibility through abuse of power. And so women are needed in positions of leadership. They're more sensitive and caring, so they're not going to be as domineering or ruthless. But the truth is more along the lines that men have walked away from institutions that they have rightly perceived to be biased against them. And once women get in positions of power, they are the worst abusers of power. Isaiah 3:12, it says, "As for my people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. O my people, they which lead thee cause thee to err, and destroy the way of thy paths." And often, women who were abused or neglected as children, where the father was absent and they were exploited by their mother's live-in boyfriend, grew up to become lawyers and judges, where they can devote their lives to waging war against fathers. They perpetuate injustice by rendering another generation of children without their fathers, unprotected from the predators of the world and longing for the love that a father provides. they end up oppressing 10 times worse than the patriarchy that they have rebelled against. And women in power are not suited to bear rule because they lack internal restraints. A man with external strength needs exercise internal restraint. But a woman, when she becomes in a position of power, they fight like a hurricane. There is no restraint. It goes overboard. Just think of some recent examples in American history with Madeleine Albright bombing Serbia because they dared to defend themselves against radical Islamic terrorists. Or Janet Reno burning children alive because some of the children might be sexually exploited. Or Hillary Clinton destroying a free Libya to make way for the terror of Islamic extremists. This has not been for the benefit of anyone, and it has not worked out better than men being in power. Of course, the ultimate arena of triumph for women is in the divorce court, where they have triumphed so completely that they've destroyed a whole generation. Women are twice as likely to file for divorce than men, for the obvious reason that they know they will get child custody and all of the lucrative benefits that proceed from that. The myth of caring mothers rescuing their children from a domineering father has been greatly exaggerated. The Bolsheviks pioneered no-fault divorce in Russia in 1918. This makes perfect sense. Resistance to central government will be effectively crippled when families are destroyed. Adults and children will be without the sense of a local focus for their own well-being, which comes from having a strong family unit. And children will grow up without a conviction of conservatism, since to them, the traditional family is nothing worth conserving. Then the state usurps the position of first allegiance, and Stalin becomes the father of all. Men are legally hamstrung by a system birthed in communism to destroy a civilization that was built by Christians. But the root of the problem goes even deeper than this. We might ask, where did feminism come from? If feminism has had such a bad effect on our society, only a few of the symptoms we've begun to name, what's the source of feminism and how did it come into our society? Well, Betty Friedan inspired second wave feminism with her 1963 book, The Feminine Mystique, in which she wrote about the problem that has no name. That's referring to patriarchy, of course. Now, I explore the roots of feminist thought and their influence on American Protestant Christianity by exposing and naming what I call the problem that cannot be named. Feminism bears strong similarities to Marxist communism, which purports to free women from domestic service by the equality that is offered in service to the state. And it assumes a sort of parens patriae, where there is no father but the state. But feminism does not come from communism. They're similar. Both feminism and communism have a common source. Radical second wave feminist leaders and spokeswomen were overwhelmingly Jewish. You've heard the quote, "A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle." Of course, that was made by Gloria Steinem, who was a Jewish CIA agent. There's Betty Friedan, also Jewish, who founded the National Organization for Women and NARAL Pro-Choice America, which promotes abortion and other deviant behaviors. Other prominent Jewish activists and spokeswomen read like a who's who of second wave feminism, vastly disproportionate to their standing in society. So the source of feminism and the problem that cannot be named is the Jewish problem. Now, of course, you hear this, your mental faculties are immediately going to shut down. And it sounds like racism. You know, this is hate speech. This is something that cannot be spoken. But I just spoke it, and it's because it's the truth, and it goes back to the Bible. And just give me a minute to understand. Now, I'm not racist. I don't harbor any prejudice against any particular race of people. And when we speak of the Jews, what race are we really talking about anyway? We're not really talking about a race. What race are they? And who knows? And who cares? That's not what's important. We know that they're not, for the most part, the physical descendants of Abraham. Over 80% of Jews are Ashkenazim, with no pretense to a claim to a bloodline descendant from biblical Israel. With ancient records being destroyed, the rest have no way to prove their descendancy from ancient Israel. Now, DNA testing can confirm some racial similarity, But this shows that it's been mixed with other Middle Eastern peoples, as the Bible itself testifies. But even if we concede the point that the Jews are indeed the physical descendants of Abraham, this is moot. This counts for nothing with God. This is not what it's about. John the Baptist said in Matthew 3:9, "And think not to say within yourselves, we have Abraham to our father. For I say unto you that God is able of these stones to raise up children unto Abraham." And when we speak of the Jews, we're not really talking about a religion either, as many identify themselves as Jews but are atheist or non-religious. We're talking about a spiritual heritage, which is all that really matters with God. Jesus said to the Jews, "If ye were Abraham's children, ye would do the works of Abraham." It's John 8:39. In John 8:44, he identifies their true father. He says, "Ye are of your father, the devil, and the lusts of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it." Now, the ultimate sin is the rejection and murder of Christ. This is something that the Jews called the blood guilt upon themselves when they said, "His blood be on us and on our children," Matthew 27:25. Now you may say, well, those were just certain people, the chief priests back in a certain day. This has nothing to do with the Jewish people. This is ancient history. How can this be applied in a broader sense? But Jews are the spiritual descendants of those who cried out for the blood of Jesus. The spirit of Pharisaism exists to this present day, as Jews themselves will testify that they are essentially following the traditions of the ancient Pharisees. And this is how Judaism has come to characterize itself since the coming of Christ. You cannot be a Jew without rejecting Christ. That's what it's all about. It's all about the rejection of Jesus as the Christ. Jesus said in Revelation 2:9, "I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan." So whether you're religious or not, to be Jewish means to reject Christ. To be Jewish and Christian are mutually exclusive. In John 9:22, it speaks of those who began to believe in Jesus, said, "But they feared the Jews, for the Jews had agreed already that if any man did confess that he was the Christ, he should be put out of the synagogue." A Jew, then, is someone who professes to be Jewish and rejects Jesus as the Christ. The true source of this definition of Judaism, or Jewishness, which some may consider anti-Semitic, is the Bible. Now, some think, well, don't the Jews follow the Bible? Don't they follow the Old Testament? American Protestants tend to think of Jews, oh, that's quaint. They're following the teachings of Moses. They don't quite get it about Jesus yet, but maybe they'll come around. No, they get it. They understand about Jesus, and they have chosen to consciously reject him. And no, they don't follow the Old Testament. That's not what it's about. That's not what Judaism is about. Jews have rejected Logos, the Word of God, and all that proceeds from that, including the spirit and the letter of the Old Testament. Now, there is sufficient evidence in the Bible alone to make this claim, without even looking on the whole tapestry of history. Jesus said to the Jews in John 5:46, "For had ye believed Moses, ye would have believed me, for he wrote of me." Now, of course, to avoid social stigma, Jews will often misrepresent themselves as following Torah. Oh, we're just trying to follow the Ten Commandments and the teachings of Moses, but that's a ruse. That's just for public consumption. The root of Judaism is not Torah, but the Talmud. Now, in place of the Mosaic Law, they hold to oral traditions, which Jesus called the traditions of men, or the traditions of the elders, but which we know as the Talmud. In Mark 7:8, it says, "For laying aside the commandment of God, ye hold the tradition of men." This tradition continues to this day. The Talmud essentially permits what the Torah forbids, and forbids what the Torah permits. The Talmud, not the Torah, is the guiding text of Judaism and is full of blasphemy against Jesus Christ and prescriptions for ungodliness. It says that Jesus was born from an unclean union, calling him the bastard son of a whore. Now, in the Bible itself, the Jews taunted Jesus in a way that implies that they were hinting at this when in John 8:41 it says, we be not born of fornication, implying that Jesus was. They say that Jesus was rightly executed for blasphemy and idolatry, and that he was not raised from the dead. They claim that he is in hell, boiling in hot excrement, where all his followers will go. They call churches latrines. They make ritual prayers for revolution, and to absolve themselves from all guilt from oaths that they will break in the coming year. They make inane legal arguments which allow for certain forms of adultery, pedophilia, abortion, and other crimes against God and humanity. Modern Judaism follows in the tradition of the biblical Pharisees. In this sense, they are the spiritual children of those who earned the blood guilt of crucifying Christ, the greatest sin of all time. Now, the Church of Christ is the true Israel. Christians read their Bible and they see all these promises of God to Israel, and they have a lot of positive sentiment, which is often misdirected towards the modern day political nation state of Israel, which is very far removed from the ancient Israel, although many of its worst characteristics have been amplified and codified in this system. But Israel, in the context of the promises of God, is the people of God. And those who believe in Jesus are the true Israel of God. They are the true children of Abraham. It says in Galatians 3:6-7, even as Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. Know ye therefore that they which are of faith, the same are the children of Abraham. And in Galatians 3:29 it says, and if ye be Christ, then ye are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. So those who believe in Jesus are the ones who follow the spirit of the Mosaic law and uphold divine righteousness. Now, Jews can be saved like anyone else if they come to faith in Jesus as the Messiah. Jesus is the Savior of all men alike. In Romans 11:23 it says, God is able to graft them in again. In Romans 11:32 it's, for God has concluded them all in unbelief, that he might have mercy upon all. All men, Jews and Gentiles, are concluded in unbelief and are sinners before God. And all men, Jews and Gentiles, are saved and brought into the church through the mercy of God. Salvation is only by mercy, not by merit, not by physical heritage, and certainly not by pride in a certain national identity. Now, God regards nothing of the flesh, which is pride in national heritage. This is an impediment to salvation. In John 1:11-13, it says, he came unto his own, and his own received him not. But as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name, which were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. So Judaism, which is based upon the rejection of Jesus Christ as Savior, how did it come to influence Christianity to such a huge degree? And I'm speaking specifically here of American Protestant Christianity. How did Judaism infect Protestant Christianity, and when? Where did it come in? Well, from the very inception, Jews were involved in the Protestant Reformation. When the Protestants sought to free themselves from the corrupt powers of the Roman Catholic Church, they turned away from the authority of the Pope. They turned instead to the authority of the Holy Bible. And immediately they are confronted with the sheer volume of Old Testament scriptures. These are, of course, written in Hebrew, mostly, and detailed the history of the Jewish people with the nationalistic overtones. In order to understand the Old Testament in the original language and to translate it, Luther, Zwingli, Calvin, and other early reformers had to learn from Jewish rabbis who attempted to influence them with a Talmudic interpretation. In the content of the Old Testament itself, it's primarily concerned, now when you read it in a literal sense, it's talking about the establishment of an earthly, physical kingdom as a manifestation of God's power. The delusion of a special destiny for a chosen people, for triumph in battle and riches and earthly greatness, is an alluring ambition. You want to be like King David, right? You have all this wealth and all these wives and destroy your enemies. That appealed to Protestants who wanted to be free. But this is in complete contrast to the higher teaching of Christ, whose kingdom is not of this world. Certain kinds of Anabaptists especially fell prey to this interpretation of a kingdom from God that was soon at hand to satisfy their present earthly desires and to help them grasp a paradise on earth. This soon turned into a hell on earth, as was the case with the followers of Thomas Munster in the German Peasants' War and John of Leyden in the Munster Rebellion. Jews supported the political rebellion of Anabaptists, including the Albigensians and other revolutionary Protestants, such as the Hussites, that would bring about bloody regime change, which favored the Jewish desire for a destruction of the present order, that they might find a new order out of the chaos. And as a practical matter, even reputable Protestants needed opportunity, money, and political intelligence to advance their temporal goals. They had a political revolution to work as well as a theological one. Jews were all too eager to help foment insurrection within Christendom by aiding Protestants, and they were often allies in the promotion of religious tolerance, financial enterprise, and the sharing of valuable secrets through their social network of traveling merchants. Calvin and later Cromwell took a page from the Jewish playbook in their allowance for the lucrative practice of usury, which had long been forbidden to Christians by canon law. Cromwell sought to readmit Jews to Britain, which had long been banished. Eventually, with Jewish finance, the city of London later became the world's center of financial exploitation. In the Elizabethan age, there was also widespread Jewish influence through Protestant adaptation of the diabolical secret arts of Kabbalah. This is where we get the English archetype of the white wizard, or the good white magic. Of course, Kabbalah is the source of all occultism and all magic. It all goes down to Jewish Kabbalah, which is essentially a passing on of the Babylonian mystery religions. When the Jews were exiled to Babylon, they absorbed some of the Babylonian mystery religions into their oral traditions and subverted the laws of God, and some of this later was incorporated into the Talmud and passed on. Now, inasmuch as the very identity of the Jewish people is based upon a rejection and murder of the Christ of God, Jews are eager to rebel against any and all authority, especially regicide against monarchy. In the effort to find a new order out of chaos and salvation by means of various false Christs, which they are prone to espouse from time to time. So they rejected Jesus as the Christ because he was a lowly and suffering servant. He didn't come with the power and wealth and greatness of a new King David. He came as a herald of a completely different kingdom of God, which the Jews have rejected. But they keep looking back. They keep looking for a Messiah that is going to give them this wealth and power, and they're going to rule the world, and it's going to be a golden age, and all these things they keep looking for in vain. All throughout history is just a litany of false Christs that the Jewish people have looked to deliver them from their second-class status in the world and make them the rulers of the world. Of course, there was the famous rebellion against Rome in AD 66 to 70 when the Zealots took the desert fortress of Masada. There was also another Jewish rebellion in AD 115 in Babylon, Cyrenaica, and Cyprus. And then in AD 130, Simon Bar Kokhba was hailed as a Messiah, and he led a revolt against Rome, which had a brief initial victory before it was utterly destroyed. As numerous as their support of false messiahs throughout history, with Sabbatai Zevi and Jacob Frank as most notable among them, it has always been their practice to support revolution, to support the subversion of the social order, especially a Christian kingdom, and to promote intellectual revolution, sexual revolution, political revolution, and violent, bloody regime change in whatever way it can be promoted. Of course, Judaism was also covertly instrumental in the founding and initial leadership of the Jesuit order, which continues these practices to this day. It promotes the practices of corrupting the powerful through sexual favors and then fomenting political insurrection. One of the most visible manifestations of their bloody work in modern history is the Russian Revolution. They looked to Marx and Trotsky as potential messiahs, and the Bolshevik Party was initially founded, financed, and led by Jews. But inasmuch as the Bolsheviks have passed away, we are still continually affronted and infiltrated and controlled by cultural Marxism, which is running rampant in America. And this takes on many forms. Of course, much of it comes from Hollywood, which really is owned by Jews, which they themselves will testify and boast of. And they put out all kinds of perverse entertainment in movies and television and pornography. Jews make up over 90% of American pornographers. And through Hollywood, through the dissemination of movies and television, they have led a deliberate campaign to undermine traditional morals and family values. Now, the Hollywood they run has mainstreamed wife swapping, fornication, male homosexuality, lesbianism, transvestitism, pedophilia, drug and alcohol abuse, and other forms of sinful self-indulgence. What is television about? It used to be, the home on the range and the good cowboy, and now it's like an axe murder. It's degraded to the lowest common denominator. But this is not what the public has desired. This is by design. Those who make the movies are pushing an agenda. This is not consumer driven. This is being foisted upon the consumers. Of course, the Jews have also brought homosexuality out of the closet and into our faces through numerous rights legislation. Sodomy is shown in the media and television as normal, healthy, enjoyable, something to celebrate openly. Be brazen about it. The Jews have founded, fronted, and funded practically every homosexual advocacy group in America. Of course, we get to the point of feminism, which Judaism has been the foundation for launching feminism. The Jews have brought radical feminism to American women and girls thanks to the steady diet of anti-male, anti-marriage, and anti-family books, lectures, and college campuses, and groups, and portrayals in the media. Many women now see the prospect of marriage, which is a normal human desire, and childbearing as being like an impediment to their advancement and well-being. You're not going to be happy if you have a family and children because you got to go have a career. It's just, ad nauseum, goes on and on. And as it was with ancient Israel, with their practice of making their children pass through the fire to Moloch, which God condemned in many places, the Jews have made a sacrament of child sacrifice through modern-day abortion. Planned Parenthood and the National Abortion Rights Action League is run from top to bottom by Jews. Unregulated abortion on demand is touted in the Jewish-controlled media as a positive social good for the United States, with an immensely disproportionate percentage of abortionists themselves being Jewish. The Jews have definitely made a killing out of killing. Now, some Christians tend to think that Jews are an ally in the fight against abortion, but this is very naive, because Jews are not following the Torah, where abortion is forbidden. They're following the Talmud, where it's permitted. They have these inane legal arguments. It's just like the doctrine of the pursuer. The child is pursuing the mother and therefore can turn around and be slain, which is a interpretation of the, Asahel pursuing this guy, and he says, why should I slay thee? Turn aside from me. Why should I slay thee? And he doesn't turn aside, and he slays him. They say, well, then it's okay to kill your baby. This is the kind of interpretation that goes on in the Talmud. Now, of course, this is everywhere in America. We have seen this day in and day out. This is what America has become. America has become essentially the promised land and the implementation of every Jewish ideal. Everything was in the legal system, for the ACLU and other groups, they've waged war against Christian symbols in public places. America is overwhelmingly Christian. They try to set up a cross or a nativity scene and they get sued. But of course the Jews have gigantic menorah on the White House lawn. It's all good. Why? Because Congress and the White House bought and paid for with Jewish money. This is a very hypocritical double standard. The Jews have also sold us this lie of egalitarianism. Any religion and every people group, they're all the same. Doesn't matter. It could be like the Aztecs who eat your heart out. Well, that's just a valid expression of their religion and people. It's all good. and the Christians may do this other stuff. It's all equal. Except, of course, for the Jewish people, which are uniquely moral and wise and have these wonderful secret traditions that have been handed down for centuries. And this is just part of their subversion of the social order. Of course, they're pushing multiculturalism on everyone else, but they don't allow multiculturalism in Israel or other places. There's no freedom of religion in Israel. We see what their campaign is to weaken other peoples through this intermarriage and mixing of cultures and making everything nothing except for Judaism. And of course, they believe that they are destined to rule the world, and they do rule America. Essentially, through Jewish financial power, they have bought control of Congress. But if anyone calls attention to their disproportionate power, the hundreds of lobbying groups that are promoting Jewish interests, and the way in which American politicians will kowtow to any demand of Israel over and against American interests and to the demise of American young men in the military, well, immediately they're labeled as being anti-Semitic. This is taboo. The Anti-Defamation League is going to come after you, and you're going to be completely blackballed. But of course, the solution of these things is not to harbor any prejudice or resentment against a certain group of people. It's not who they are that's the problem. It's what they do that we need to guard against. And we need to be aware of these things to protect ourselves and to protect Christian culture from these influences. Now, what are their practices? What do they do? I've mentioned some of them, but I could name a few more. There are as many as there are practices that deny Christ and diverge from righteousness. But anyway, they're masters of the media. They're masters of propaganda. Of course, the motto of the Mossad is through deception, wage war. And they are waging a war of deception upon Christian civilization. Through worldview manipulation in education, through mind control, the actual science of mind control. They investigate through sexual suggestion and other things, trauma. Of course, they promote an improper freedom of speech. They'll say, yeah, we should have freedom of speech for all kinds of blasphemy and all kinds of profanity and pornography and all these things. But at the same time, they repress speech through political correctness. You can't say anything about how much money Israel's getting or what they're doing to the Palestinians. You can't talk about these things because this isn't politically correct. And if anybody does try to talk about these things, then of course they're a victim of libel and slander, and they're going to be removed from office and forced to give an apology or whatever. So in addition to that, of course, we mentioned through Hollywood about movies and television, and Jews have always been involved in immoral comedy and theater, which is frequently makes a mockery of Christian values and of Christ himself. What is the solution to this? Well, the solution is we need to maintain a freedom of information for people, but at the same time we should legislate against indecency. Pornography is not speech, it's something else. And stripping is a behavior, it's not a verbal expression. There are ways in which expression can be limited that is immoral. And of course, Jews are masters at exploiting human weakness as well, which we know full well. They're often involved in the sale of drugs and alcohol and the adulteration of the food supply. We look around and see Americans are like the fattest people on the planet. What's going on? It all goes back to what they're eating. What they're eating is full of chemicals. They're owned by these chemical companies that are Jewish owned and run. And of course, there's a corruption of the medical practice as well, pushing dangerous pharmaceuticals, the Rockefeller pharmaceutical cartel, pushing all this stuff on people as if it were medicine when it's in fact poison. And Jews are also known historically as being masters of poisons. So what is the solution to this, the drugs and the adulterated food? We should have informed consent about what you are to put into your body, like sound labeling laws. And we should control the dangers through tort law. And there should be no immunity for vaccine-making corporations or drug companies. They should have no legal immunity for what they do, but if they make something that causes harm, they should be liable for that harm. Jews are also masters of the subversion of justice. They have undue political privilege. They control the halls of Congress, the Supreme Court. Supreme Court is, 33% Jewish, when I think that the population is a little bit less than that. So they're vastly overrepresented in the halls of power, and they're masters at dealing in secrets and political intelligence, which goes way back. And they can use blackmail against powerful figures. If they know the secrets about so-and-so, if you step out of line, boom, out of the closet, you're going down. They're involved in bribery, lobbying against Congress. It's all goes back to the money supply. You can hardly get to be in a position of power without playing this game. Of course, they make the false oaths we talked about earlier. They'll make a ritual prayer to absolve themselves from all the oaths that they're going to break in the future. And historically, they've often made false conversion to Christianity when it suited their purpose politically. Solution to this is we should have a division of powers and transparency in self-government. Nothing revolutionary about that. That's the way America used to be. The Jews are masters of subversive teachings. They're the ones who promote atheism quite commonly, and magic and the occult, which of course all comes from Kabbalah, the New Age, and it's all the same old Babylonian mystery religion. It's all the same old things that the Jews have brought to us and preserved through the secret arts of Kabbalah. Historically, Jews were known for some Kabbalists practicing blood ritual. Now, of course, their blood ritual is more out in the open with the promotion of abortion, but it still goes on. There's Judaizing within Christianity, affecting Christianity with this idea that, our kingdom is now. This is the kingdom of God is at hand, and therefore it's okay to start killing people. That's why George Bush can justify the war on terror against these evildoers, as if that was somehow a good thing, like he's doing a godly thing, dropping bombs on people. Anyway, this has affected American Christianity, this whole idea that, we're God's chosen people, and therefore we need to destroy people in battle and triumph and have greatness and all this stuff, like David did, or this is a Jewish influence. This is not the way of Christ, which is a way of peace. They promoted heretical teachings within Christianity, and blasphemy, and every heretical group has often received encouragement and financial help from the Jews, who relished this sort of division and schism. The solution to this is we need to defend the faith and speak the truth without fear of consequences. We need to fight against error and maintain purity in doctrine. The Jews are masters of sexual immorality. Of course, I mentioned about the pornography. Overwhelmingly, they control and promote pornography. And they also promote other behaviors in the populace at large, like adultery, divorce and remarriage, prostitution, homosexuality, birth control, abortion. How do we deal with this? What's the solution to this? Well, there's nothing revolutionary here. We just need to legislate morality. These things should be outlawed. It's a murder to kill an unborn baby. It's permitted by Judaism, not by Christianity. We're Christian people. We need to make our own laws. Jews are masters at the intrigue of war and the practice of instigating and starting wars. They have been involved in instigating bloody revolutions throughout history. And they've been involved in the practice of war profiteering. When a war is going on, you can make far more money, loaning money to both sides and getting through the blockades with your red shield. And in many ways, the Jews have vastly benefited from the misery and suffering inflicted on other peoples through war. They conspire with enemies of their host nation, and they try to destroy national identity of all people, but except for the Jews. What's the solution to this? Well, we should have local self-government and eliminate all aid to the terrorist state of Israel. But it all comes down to the money supply. The money supply is the root of all evil. Of course, in the Bible it says the love of money is the root of all evil. But in the geopolitical world, the source of money is the root of all evil. Jews have historically had an aversion to honest labor and sought to enrich themselves through usury and other merchant trade practices. But they've finally capitalized upon the ultimate way to have power in this world, which is through control of the money supply. Through the issuance of fiat currency and fractional reserve banking, Jews have, through the Federal Reserve System, have essentially bought the world. And this is their path to power, is through financial exploitation. The solution to this is we need to drive the money changers from the temple. We need to coin our own money. We need to outlaw fractional reserve banking and government debt through the emission of bills of credit. So what is the solution to the Jewish problem? Now, this is nothing sinister here. I'm not talking about gassing Jews, which, by the way, never happened. It was a great story, but it's physically impossible. It was just some war propaganda put out by Stalin that the Americans ran with. But anyway, they've gotten a lot of mileage out of it and promoted this idea of Jews as victims, when in fact, the Jews are the ones who are victimizing native populations. The Jews should be protected by law, like everyone else. They should be protected in life and in their commerce. They play an essential role in our society. They may be our enemies, and the Bible itself says, as regard to the gospel, they are enemies for your sake. But they are conquered not through animosity, but through love. We need to reach out to them with love as any people group, and perhaps more so with patience and understanding and the gospel of Christ, which is valid for all. All are sinners and all need the mercy of God. And it's God's will that evil forces and temptations sanctify us. How so? Part of the mix is that all these temptations coming in and seeking to corrupt Christian culture is going to separate the sheep from the goats. This is something that God desires to use in his process of sanctifying a people for himself. Regarding sin, Jesus said in Matthew 18:7, "Woe unto the world because of offenses, for it must needs be that offenses come. But woe to that man by whom the offense cometh." The devil operates only inasmuch as the sovereign will of God allows. There is a predetermined amount of evil that must be perpetrated in the world to result in the final condemnation. It must needs be that offenses come. And if these offenses come through a certain group of people, that's part of God's plan. In 1 Thessalonians 2:13-16 says, "For ye have also suffered like things of your own countrymen, even as they have of the Jews, who both killed the Lord Jesus and their own prophets, and have persecuted us. And they please not God, and are contrary to all men, forbidding us to speak to the Gentiles, that they might be saved, to fill up their sins alway, for the wrath is come upon them to the uttermost." So the cause here is the coming wrath, and the effect is the filling up of sins in this life beforehand. All of this is part of God's eternal plan. They have to earn it, and the means have been ordained as well as the end. But since woe comes upon the man through whom the offense cometh, is it not better that offenses primarily come through a few rather than the many? Let's say that there were 10 men in the room and 10 poison pills that had to be eaten. Would it be better if each man ate a single pill, or one man grabbed all 10 and scarfed them down? If a certain group pursues evil in this world in a way that will temporarily advantage themselves, that is good in a sense that it absolves others who may not be as inclined to take those paths. Jesus chose Judas to be near him and allowed him to continue in power, knowing full well what he would do. Jesus allowed this to happen in order to fulfill the purpose of God in bringing glory to himself. Now, this drama replays itself throughout all human history. It is God's will that we resist temptation and endure persecution, that we might be sanctified in the midst of an evil world. So the solution to this is we need to recognize it for what it is and speak out against it. We need to protect our families, our societies from this influence. In Matthew 18:8 it says, "Wherefore if thy hand or thy foot offend thee, cut them off and cast them from thee. We need to cut off and cast from our lives these practices that will corrupt us and undermine our relationship with God. And on a wider sense, as the body of society, we need to ostracize, to cut out and put away from ourselves the influences of this group of people. This is something that has been practiced for thousands of years by Christian nations and Christian civilization. And we look on it and many think, well, man, why were all the Christians throughout history so racist? The truth is that they were sensible. And a lot of these policies, nothing is revolutionary about these policies. It's only in our modern day that we have been so thoroughly corrupted that we can't see the forest for the trees. We don't know what has hit us. We see all these evil influences all around, and what can we do? Well, our salvation lies in Jesus Christ. And while others may reject him and seek to undermine his influence, let us focus upon Christ, and by that we will prevail.